Hello, welcome back. This is Jeff Byers, and this is Andy 150, and I'll be your instructor for this series of videos. And we have already have all the low poly modeling completed. Now we're going to go ahead and get into UV mapping and texturing, lighting, and rendering in this module. So module 2. So we will go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of zoom out of your scene and then select the entire scene that you see here. And I want you to go up under poly modeling, make sure that is selected, and then click on the first icon, that center pivot. You want to center pivot all the objects, okay? We also want to delete by type history, so we want to get rid of all the history and all the objects, so click on that, okay? And then we want to center pivot, or excuse me, we want to freeze transformation all the objects. So if we do move something away, and let me kind of give you an example. So if we do all that, okay, we delete center pivot, that means all of the pieces will be center pivoted to that object, okay? Which makes it nice to move, okay? So all the pieces are center pivoted, so we can move them a lot easier, like I said. And then we've got delete by type history, which clears out all the history. So if you are completely finished modeling, then that's the thing you want to do. So you do that right before you UV map and texture your object. And then, of course, the freeze transformations on the objects that you've already got set up will make it a lot easier for you if you want to move them, isolate them, move a wall, isolate the wall by itself, or whatever you want to do. All we have to do then at that point to get them all back together is you select them and just zero everything out. And that will get them all back to where they were. So it makes it a lot easier for you to return things to its original position. As you see, I can click on the object and then find the translate that I want to zero out, and I can zero that out, and it brings everything back again, which is a nice thing. It makes it a little easier for you. Okay, with that said, we're going to go ahead and start UV mapping all the objects in this scene. Since these are going to be game objects, we'll need to combine them. So we only need to texture one chair, right? We don't need to texture all these separately, so we're just going to texture one chair, and then we can duplicate them around once we get them textured. And then the table, we'll go ahead and combine it and texture that. So I think the first thing I want to do to get you started is just texturing the table. So let's go ahead and hit the Q key and just select the tabletop and the legs, and then go to Mesh Combine. Okay, when you combine a mesh, then the pivot point may not be centered properly. So we do want to do a center pivot point. So pivot the point for it to be centered. And then we want to delete the history because we've already added more history. Once we do like combine, we had a combine history node in there that we needed to delete. So delete history. Okay, we haven't moved the table at all, so it's zeroed out already, so we don't need to do that again. Okay, so with that done, what we want to do is we want to go to UV editor. Okay. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and go to UV editor and go all the way down to automatic. Now, I'm going to take you through how to use automatic mapping properly. This isn't the first to go. When you do modeling that are shapes that are cubic, that's the best way to do it. Automatic works really, really well. Okay, so we take you through that. Okay. So I'm going to go to UV editor, okay, and you can kind of see, I'm going to kind of minimize that. So we have the UV editor, which shows us the laid out version, a 2D version of your faces. So You can see we have a face here, face here, face here. These are what it looks like when you lay out that the Maya lays out the UVs properly, but it doesn't take in consideration the scaling of these objects. So and it overlays everything together. So we really can't use this UV map. You're thinking to yourself that why can't we? You shouldn't be using that because it doesn't take in consideration the stretching and the scaling and all that stuff and the moving of the vertices and the shape of the object that you see here. Okay, it doesn't not take in consideration of that, and plus it was a primitive when it created that UV, so we've basically destroyed that shape, the cube shape. So it just remembers the cube shape it was in before we actually scaled it. So we got to UV map it first, so that's what we do. I'm going to have this open though so you guys can see what's going on. So here's our UV editors. It's 2D, okay? So we got U and we got V going up and down, U going side to side, and we have a 0 to 1. So 0 to 1 texture space from the U and the V. Okay? All right, and we have our toolkit, and I did not want to do that. Okay, then we've got our toolkit that got separated somehow from this. This happens a lot. Let me get that back together again, and that's not the way I wanted it. Oh, well, I'll keep them separate like this. And let's zoom out a little bit. Scale that in. There we go, so we can see a little bit better. All right, the toolkit is where we can actually change the UVs and manipulate those. Okay, we're going to keep these closed. Okay, but I'm going to click on transform. We're going to be using that. Unfold. We're going to be using that. And then align, arrange and align UVs. Okay, and we'll talk about that. All right, so there's a lot of stuff we need to talk about. Let's go ahead and get right into it then. So we've got automatic mapping on. Okay, and a lot of times I may have this open first, and then I'll do the automatic mapping, or I can go ahead and UV it, and then go into and open up the UV editor. It doesn't matter which way you do it. There's no sequence to it, but you do need to lay out the UVs, meaning you have to add another UV set to it, okay? Because these UVs won't work. All right, so we've got fewer pieces, ensure projection before deformers, load projection into square, uniform, scale mode. We will, okay, keep the percentage, create new UV set, and just kind of looking at spacing. Well, everything looks pretty good. We don't want to scratch the square. Shell layout, overlap, nope. We want it to do it into the square tile. And uniform. Okay, let's go ahead and project and see what happens. Okay. And that looks correct. Now, if you see that it's all cubes, you can see that it kept its proportions, so that the tabletop, you can tell it's right here. Okay. So, and let me open this a little bit more so we can see. We gotta get a little closer. All right, so you can tell these are the legs. Okay. These are the tops and the bottoms of the legs. Okay. So, all right, so one of the things we have to consider when we're laying out UVs is not just how we want to lay those UVs out, because Maya looks like it's done all the work for us. It really hasn't. It's just randomly put things around, and there are things upside down, and you may not want that to happen. Another thing is, if we're going to put a wood texture on here, we also want to make sure that the wood grain is going to flow the right way. Okay? All right. So wood grain, if you know anything about wood grain, if you have it flowing the wrong way, it's not going to support weight. So wood grain has to be going the long way, okay? So if we go in here and bring it into a texturing program like Substance Painter, we're going to need to know which way the grain should go, okay? All right. So I'm not going to go any further than this, and we're going to go ahead and get into the next module. I'm going to keep the UV mapping tutorials shorter than the modeling ones, and so you guys don't have to take a little break between videos. But this is what we got so far. If I click off of the object, go to selection mode, you can see it. And if I right click over in the UV editor, I can go to UV shell, and that's how we can move these shells around. Okay, so before we do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and we'll come back with part 2 of UV mapping.